Alright, welcome to the 17th 2020 NHL Draft recap, and today I'm really excited about this one because we're profiling the Minnesota Wild. And this was their first draft with former Vancouver Canucks scouting genius Judd Brackett at the helm. And frankly, I loved what the Minnesota Wild ended up with all things being considered. They only had 5 picks in this draft, but I think at least with their first 3, they did a great job. Now, starting off, they drafted Marco Rossi, and going into the draft, you just knew that Marco Rossi was going to slip. People had questions about how projectable his skating is. People had questions about his production against good versus bad teams. People had questions about how physically developed he is and how much more of a runway there is for him to develop. People looked at him playing center and his size and had question marks. It all just wrote itself, but frankly, I couldn't help myself but think that Marco Rossi was at the very worst one of the 5 best players available in this year's draft in a multitude of different ways. He's such an impactful player at both ends of the ice. He's an absolute genius when he plays hockey. He's a great offensive player, both passing the puck and shooting it, and he's an absolute machine at carrying pucks up the ice with control, as well as distributing the puck to his line mates in those transitions. I just really love what Marco Rossi brings to the game, and I think at 9th overall, this is a foundational player for the Minnesota Wild for the next decade. And at 37th overall, the Minnesota Wild took Marat Khusnutdinov. Now, everybody and their dog knows what I think of Marat Khusnutdinov, and I absolutely love this kid. I've been watching him play since the beginning of this season, and I'm still very impressed with what he can do on the ice. He is a very raw and long-term project in terms of his overall ability to drive offense consistently, but he has all the tools to get there. His speed, his skating, he's a relentless puck-pursuing player at both ends of the ice, an excellent distributor of the puck to his line mates in transition, drove tremendous amounts of offensive transitions with control of the puck, and passed the puck more often than plenty of defensemen that I tracked all season this year, and maintained control of the puck extremely well. He's an excellent possession center, drives great analytics in a multitude of different ways, and I just can't get enough of watching Marat Khusnutdinov skate around the ice and just play the game really, really well. I'm really excited to see what he can be. He's probably not an NHL player for at least another 2 or 3 seasons, if that, but when he does cross over the pond and play in North America, I have really high expectations for him. This could be a steal at 37 for Minnesota. At 39, they took Ryan O'Rourke, and I know I had Ryan O'Rourke ranked a little bit lower, but the more and more I watched of Ryan O'Rourke, the more and more receptive I would have been to taking him in this slot. He's a really good passer into the neutral zone and stretching the ice offensively. He steps up from the blue line really effectively, and he has a really solid shot for a defenseman. I think his defensive game needs a bit of work. His skating, I didn't think was good enough to be warranting of something like a first-round pick. I had him ranked much lower than 39th overall, but he is a solid defender in a multitude of different ways, and I really like his ability to send pucks up the ice with control. He needs to work on his overall consistency and refining things a little bit. Sending passes into no man's land was a little bit of a problem, and I think his overall pace to the game wasn't high enough, but there is an interesting talent profile here to work with, and I liked the pick at 39 as well. At 65, they took Damon Hunt from the Moose Jaw Warriors. Now, it is hard to get a really good read on Damon Hunt because he was injured for so long this season, and when he played, he unfortunately had to play for the Moose Jaw Warriors, and let me tell you, they were bad, and he was a big reason why they weren't worse. He was a solid defense-first player that put up a lot of metrics that were quite comparable to a player like Caden Gooley. And if you can get a player who compares favorably to a player like Caden Gooley on a team that is significantly worse than the team that Caden Gooley played on in the 3rd round of the draft, I'm not going to complain. I think Damon Hunt has interesting potential. He's a strong defense-first player, a decent passer, and I think that you can work with that, especially in a 3rd-round pick. I like this pick for Minnesota. I don't expect a tremendous amount out of Damon Hunt, but if he can come back from his injury with a roaringly positive pace, this could be another great pick for the Minnesota Wild this season. And finally, at 146, I think the Minnesota Wild took just the one guy that has a glaring issue that needs fixing before he can be considered a real solid NHL prospect in Pavel Novak. I really like Novak's creativity. When he gets involved defensively, he's really good at stripping pucks off of his opponent, plays hard. I just felt like the pace to his game and his overall skating ability in a multitude of different ways was just not at anywhere close to an NHL level. I think this is a player that has good offensive creativity, really smart player on the power play, drove really good metrics at 5-on-5 this year from what I saw, but there were real questions about how his game projects. He really isn't the most efficient skater, especially for a small player. He can get removed from play a little bit too easily, but he does adapt to pressure pretty well, and he has a creative mind offensively that can drive offense in a multitude of ways. At 146, if you pair him with a really good skating coach for the next few years, I think it's a perfectly reasonable swing to take, and it caps off what I felt was a really impressive draft for the Minnesota Wild. So for the Minnesota Wild, I'm giving them a 1C. I think overall they did a really solid job. I love Marco Rossi and how he plays the game. I love Marat Kuznetsov and how he plays the game. I am not the biggest fan of Ryan O'Rourke, but I understand the case study for why he would go at 39th overall. I don't mind the Damon Hunt pickup at 65. I have some question marks, but considering he pairs favorably to some players that went much higher in the draft than he did, I don't mind this swing and seeing what happens as Moose Jaw hopefully improves. And Pavel Novak at 146, he's not bad. He's just a guy that needs to learn how to skate at a higher and higher level every single year as he develops. He's a solid, skilled offensive player with a great creative mind, but there are some legitimate question marks that will hold him back from the NHL one day. But this is a player who at times was ranked much higher than 146 on my own list, so I don't have a problem taking him where he went. So that's it for the Minnesota Wild draft recap. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon or here on YouTube by clicking join below. You get access to a Discord server, early access to videos and data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects, as well as plenty of other goodies. Or you can pick up some merchandise from the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of all profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and join me in the next one where we look at the Vancouver Canucks.